Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. This is Springans, the new support, but it is a tiny bit more expensive now that the new cards came out because obviously this is how Konami rolls these days. Super rares, ultra rares, you name it. And I want to talk about how you can make this deck even cheaper if you just want to try it out, or if you already have the old cards, not sure, should I craft all of the new ones? And I will be talking about this because we have Tally-Ho Springans, a card that has incredible soul charge, it searches stuff from the deck, but give it a second, if you lack certain extra deck cards that can really benefit from the whole soul charge thing, then you might be, well, in a bit of a weird position because yes, this card is good and it's a searcher as well, even if you don't use the effect to special summon from the graveyard, but you can easily search this card and it doesn't change all that much if you just run it at 1. If you just want to try out the deck and you got one of this from the new pack and you got one of this one from the new pack and you're just like, oh, is this deck actually worth it? Should I try it out or should I not? Because then you can just try it out with 1 and then still craft the next 2 at a later stage if you want to, because that's not going to be too bad. You're going to be focusing more around like the go second place then, or go first place, whatever you want to be running. You can put cards in like Lost Wind if you want to go for the more cheaper stuff. You can obviously run cards like Triple Tactics Talent if you want to. You can run hand traps instead of it. There's lots of different things to run. You could also run like Pot of Prosperity if you have that, for example. You can run things like Book of Moon that are budget, but you can use them going first and going second. And just try out one of this because this is very, very searchable in this deck. And from that point onwards, continue, because the thing that this card does is obviously add 1 Springans monster from your deck to your hand, and then you can special summon more cards from your graveyard. But if you lack the payoff for them, like the rank 4 monsters that actually do stuff during your opponent's turn, then this card isn't as good. So you could cut this one down to like 1 if you wanted to. And also, there's another thing that I want to be talking about in terms of budgetness. If you really have never played Springans before, then the only cards that you need are the Exis monster and you need this one, really, because these are, well, essential to your game plan. Without them, you can't really do much. But you do not need to craft Springans Ship Explorer for some reason, because this card actually, like, it's a good card to have, and don't get me wrong, in a Springans deck it does stuff, but you don't need it anymore since they have a new boss monster now. And the new boss monster was in the new set, so you might have picked that up as well if you're looking into this deck profile right this second, because this is what's new. So you would get away with only running 1 of this and cutting this completely if you just want to be trying out this deck. But cards that you definitely have to be running is Springans Watch, you definitely have to be running 2 Merrymaker, and I would say these days you definitely have to be running Branded and High Spirits, because otherwise you lose on too many searchers if you already cut this down to 1. And yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes you have to make certain sacrifices, but yeah, you would get away with just crafting these 5 super rares to try out the deck if you already have 1 of this and 1 of this. And then if you like the deck, you can still craft 1 of this and then hopefully maybe pull 2 more of the pack if you want to go into it, or just craft that as well. So you should be fine with that. That just saying. First, now let's talk about the deck. Since the deck is fairly decent, I include the classic Master Pack bundle cards in here that count as free cards, because most of the people will have 1 of this because they opened the 750 gem for 10 packs and 1 of these cards for free. So this time it is Ash Blossom, it is Infinite Impermanence, and it is Forbidden Droplet. You can play Nibiru in here, but it also harms you a little bit, so it depends on the meta. If Nibiru is like a really strong card, then yes, put 1 in here. If not, it's not super necessary and it can harm you, well, your playstyle a little bit at least. We have a triple Springans Rockey, a card that's very nice and has like a slight resource loop going on with Brothers, so there's that, because it can, when it's normal or special summoned, target 1 Great Sand Sea Golgonda, so you can recycle your field spell as well, or 1 Springans monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. That's nice. And let's also talk about what makes Springans kind of ish, because you do use that effect from time to time. You used to use it a lot more, now it's not as crazy anymore, but they all have the effect, well, most of them have the effect that this card is in your hand or field or graveyard. You can target 1 Springans Exis monster you control, attach this card to it as material. So only a Springans Exis monster, and I say this with the utmost of importance because yes, there are Springans Exis monsters that aren't Springans Exis monsters now, so there's that bit of a problem. And also to keep in mind, when this card is normal special summoned, you can also get 1 Springans monster in your graveyard back to your hand, so you can recycle your Merrymakers. which would make you believe that 1 is enough, but you actually, for a lot of combos, need 2 already, so there is that one. We run a double Springans Pedor, I don't want to get too much into this name. The card isn't like crazy. You add more Springans names to the deck, which can be quite helpful because sometimes you need cards in your hand that you can attach to one of your Exis monsters to get rid of them. Yugioh, for example, and then you have stuff in the graveyard that you want to be doing with them. The effect can be nice to get like a Sargas back on board, for example, but other than that, doesn't really matter too much. So this is the one that you could cut to 1 if you want to, if you're lacking space. The card looks like a Digimon as well, so that is very interesting. Yeah, you just have it in your 4 names, but you could cut it down to 1 if you want to. Springans Brothers, a card that in my opinion is quite essential for the deck, because when it is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target one Springans monster, even Exis monster, and special summon in defense position. And if this card is in your hand, field, or graveyard, you can obviously attach it again, but the first effect is the one that counts, and you have 2 ways of sending this card from the deck to the graveyard, so very important, and the field spell also can send it from the hand to the graveyard, so this card is in a good spot with this. If you might have asked, how do I get this off? Do I have to run Foolish Burial or something? No, there are in-archetypal ways to get this to the graveyard from the deck or the hand. A new inclusion in this that I didn't include the last time I did this deck profile, I think because it wasn't out at this point and I haven't redone this, is Springans Kitt, a Springans card that isn't really a Springans card just by name, basically. It doesn't do all that much for the Springans stuff. You can interact with the fusion monster a bit more, which is good. You can special summon this from your hand, which is good. And you can search the cards branded in High Spirits, which searches you lots of stuff. This is a card that does the things because it can send your fusion monster to the graveyard. And if you have that in the graveyard during the end phase, then you can summon out your Captain Sargas from the deck, which is quite nice. And then if this card is in your hand and you have one of the fusion monsters in your graveyard, then you can special summon this from your hand. So this is quite nice, and then it can search this, but it has to tuck 1 card back into the deck, which usually isn't too much of a problem. Obviously it would be better if it wasn't, but since it's a branded card, yeah, you know where this goes. You don't want to be given branded any more pluses than they already do anyway. We have 2 Springans Branga. You can cut this down to 1, but I actually do like the 2, especially in a variant that's more grindy, because it's not as powerful, because we lack some of the extra deck cards that you usually want to be playing, so you don't finish off games as quickly as you like. So I like the 2 of him here, and also because the effect in the graveyard is quite nice, because you can search any Springans card from your deck if you banish this and one other Springans monster with a different name from your graveyard. So if you discard this from your hand with Golgonda, oof, this is going to cause me issues in this deck profile, then you can search one Springans card, and yeah, I like to have this at 2 in here so I get this effect off more. You can send it to the graveyard from deck a lot of the time as well, but sometimes it's nice to have this in hand and then get the effect still, because with this you can search very powerful cards. 2 Springans Captain Sargas. You could get away with running 1 if you still feel like you run too many Springans and your hand is too Springany at the start, and with them, if they are in your hand, you can't really do all that much with them because they're level 8s, besides attach them to one of your monsters. So yeah, it's a bit problematic from time to time, but for this card, you have to discard 1 Springans card, and this adds another name to the deck. You can cut it, but I feel like it doesn't matter too much, and if you have them in your deck, it can be quite nice, because if for some reason you start with 1 in your hand and then you want to use the effect of this card to special summon it, it can be problematic, because if I'm not mistaken, this card just searches stuff from your deck and then you can special summon it if it's in the deck, but if you already drew into it, then you have a harder time getting this on board. Not completely pointless because you have Yugioh, but in this specific version I feel like 2 makes sense, but you can cut it down to 1 if you want to chance it a little bit. We did include Therion King Regulus in here, one of the good cards that makes this deck a bit more expensive, but this card is used in lots of different decks, and it will only be used a bit more these days, I feel, because Therion gets, don't want to say more support, but more action with certain cards. So yeah, this card is a generally just good card that you can use in multiple different decks, machine decks as well. So I feel like including this one does a lot, because it interacts with the new boss monster, with your new Exis monster. This can just search it out of the deck. Look at that. And with one of the other cards that I hadn't included so far, which is Spright Smashers, this also interacts with Therions. So you have multiple different ways where this card comes in handy. Also, it interacts with Springans Interluder, because you can special summon 1 level 8 monster from your graveyard. It doesn't specify Springans, so you can even summon the Therion King Regulus back from your graveyard and just keep a loop in it like this as well. So if you like one of this, does make a lot of sense in this deck, and I would say this is kind of a must include because the deck gets a lot worse if you don't play it. Not unplayable, you can cut it if you want to, but I feel like this card adds a lot to the deck because we already don't run Hope Harbinger, so we do need a way to stop power spell traps as well. We have triple Springans Watch because this card searches your field spell and your field spell is key. Also, this card can send one card from the deck to the graveyard and add one Springans monster from your deck to your hand. So there's lots of stuff to be considered. But for this, you have to have Great Sandsea Golgonda in your field zone, funny enough, because there's a new card that counts as this one, but it's a continuous spell, so these two don't interact even in the slightest. I don't know why it did say in the field zone. I don't know, maybe they didn't want this card to be too broken down the line once they decided to make more cards be counted as this. It's a bit strange, but it is a good card, and you do need it in this deck because terraforming is banned now, so we don't have any other way to search the field spell but the in-archetypal ones, unless you want to be playing Planet Pathfinder, which you could. It fits in with the whole machine theme. It's your normal summon isn't super important in the deck. It is important from time to time, but you can get by without it if you have this card on board. And if that doesn't get negated, like or Ghost Ogred and whatnot, then it is enough if you play Planet Pathfinder if you want to. I'm not saying you should. It is possible, although. And let's talk about this field spell that is mentioned so much, and funnily enough, is a rare card. Oof, Konami was really generous at the start of this game, but they have moved away from this a little bit. All Springans Xyz monsters on the field gain 1000 attack, very, very nice. And then if you control no Springans Xyz monsters, you can discard one Springans card, special summon one Springans Xyz monster from your extra deck, very, very good. And if a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by card effect, you can target one monster your opponent controls, it cannot attack for the rest of this turn. Sounds a bit bad, the second effect, but it can actually help you survive certain turns and then deal with your opponent's monsters afterwards. We have Springans Booty, very, very interesting card. If a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by card effect, seems to be a recurring theme as well, but that's basically just because of the Merrymaker effect. Then you can target one effect monster your opponent controls. Neither player can activate that effect monster's effect on the field this turn. I find it funny that I say neither player. Like, if I steal this card, I still can't activate it. Ooh, that definitely had to be on here. It is what it is. You can send this face-up card to the graveyard, activate one Great Sandsea field spell thing directly from your deck or graveyard. So this is mainly why you'll be running this card, because it gives you more access to your field spell, but also the first effect isn't terrible for certain situations, because you can trigger this at will from time to time, and then it can do stuff against certain monsters that your opponent has, so I wouldn't underestimate this card's effect. We have Forbidden Chalice in here, just as your hand trap spot. You can be running Maxi, Ash Blossom, Ghost Bell. There's lots of stuff that you want to be running at the moment, so there's that. While talking about the field spell, also I want to mention Supreme Sovereign Serpent of Golgonda. Yes, these names are incredibly long and incredibly annoying to pronounce, especially for a non-native speaker, but it is what it is. This card you can special summon when you have the field spell up, and it has some other kind of things. It gets banished when it leaves the field, but you can special summon it from the graveyard. If you then go into rank 8, it just gets detached again and ends up in the graveyard again, so it can be nice if you want to go down more the rank 8 variant. You can splash in one of them and just hope you get it at one point and then it's a nice rank 8 engine, but if not, for like a pure-ish variant of Springans, it doesn't do much for the Springans playstyle, so it's not that crazy. Besides, it protects your field spell as well and is a 3000 attack point beater. It is what it is. It's an interesting card to consider, but I don't think it's good enough to be played in this specific deck. We have Forbidden Droplet, already talked about this. Brand in High Spirits is a very interesting card because you can search it and then you can reveal one monster in your hand and send one level 8 fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard with the same type that has 2500 attack or defense points, and then you can apply this effect. To make it short, this card. You'll send this card. And yeah, then you can discard the revealed monster, and if you do, add one Fallen of Albas or one monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand. So you basically, what you do is you add this card to your hand then again, after you already possibly have normal summon to search this card. Then you have the fusion monster in your graveyard, so you can special summon it from your hand, because you can use both effects per turn, so this is quite nice. So you have 2 level 4 monsters on board with this already, and doing the end phase, then the effect of this card triggers, and you can special summon stuff like Captain Sargas. So this card, very, very strong. You could run 3 of it, but obviously this is a budget deck profile and it is somewhat searchable, so yeah, I feel like 1 is fine, but it is a very, very neat card that you could be running 3 of, because you can trigger this effect with all of the Springans monsters, because they're all machine fire monsters and well, machine monsters, and so is this one, because the type is what counts, it's not the attribute. so we are absolutely fine with that. Spright Smashers, funny enough, one of the only decks that can trigger all 3 effects of this card, because you can special summon one Springans monster if you banish one Springans, Therion, or Sprite card, mainly the Springans card, from your hand or graveyard, so that works. Then you can special summon one Springans monster from your deck. The effect that comes up the most, I would say, obviously you can special summon a Therion monster from your graveyard, can come up if you want to get Regulus back in play since it's a quick spell. Could be nice, but I think this card's effect, you have to activate this, so you can't really equip it because it's not on summon, so it doesn't really matter all that much. Plus the thing is, when you get it back, you can't equip anything to it, so it's not too crazy. You just use it for like level 8 stuff, then it is what it is. But you can still send itself back, so the equip doesn't even matter with this one, because it's not that you send the equip. You have to send one Therion monster card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard, so it doesn't even matter if it's equipped or not. Sometimes I get a bit confused if they use actually the equip cards, but yeah, the point was that it doesn't, so it doesn't matter if you can equip it or not, so you can use it during your opponent's turn if you summon it with Spright Smashers. Very confusing, so much effect text, sometimes keeping it straight with this is very hard. And you can even use the last effect because you do run one link to monsters, so you could technically even banish some stuff if you really need certain things removal that aren't targeted and aren't destroyed, so this card can help with that as well. Tally-ho, very, very interesting card. Already talked about this. Basically, you can add a Springans monster from your deck to your hand and detach materials. It's a quick play, so you can also trigger the effect of your Exis monster during the opponent's turn, because if you detach stuff, then it does stuff as well. And you can special summon that many Springans monster from your hand or graveyard. Funnily enough, this card doesn't even lock you into anything, so you can still summon anything from the extra deck, like cards like Abyss Dweller afterwards. Or even if you want to go a bit cheaper, or you already have this for some reason, Giant Hand still works. There's Tornado Dragon, technically Baguska, but I wouldn't say that's too great because it kind of harms your other monsters as well. So there's like these good cards that you can be playing. And then it has another effect that is quite interesting. During your main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Exis monster on the field. So this can be nice to disrupt your opponent's plays from time to time if they play an Exis deck and need 2 materials or need the material that's attached to it. Then you can get rid of that one, detach one material from it if you do add this card to your hand. So very, very interesting card, but you can only use one Tally-ho Springans effect per turn, only once that turn. So if you get it back to your hand, you cannot use the first effect, so you'd have to set it and use it during your opponent's turn as a quick spell. It's a very interesting way of playing this card. Infinite Impermanence, already talked about it. Now Springans Blast, I do like this card in a budget version because you can play this instead of like certain hand traps, and it's very searchable, and it's like an effect negate and can technically be 2 if you want to, and you can stop your opponent from using certain zones if they're going for some link shenanigans that can be decent as well. But yeah, you could cut this for any other cards that's good, like hand traps and whatnots. And one Springans Interluder, also because it's very searchable, interacts with your Therion card, so that's quite nice. And it can negate effects, so that helps you with any kind of card of spell effect, like spell traps also work, so this card can be quite nice. And also it has this other effect: if a face-up Exis monster you control leaves the field per card effect, you can make all monsters your opponent currently controls lose 1000 attack until the end phase. Can be very helpful to protect your extra deck monster, but we all know the battle phase isn't too crazy anymore. Talking about extra deck, triple of the Iron Dash Dragon, because there will be lots of different ways that you can send this to the graveyard. One of them is Merrymaker, the other one is the Brand in High Spirit. So I think 3 is actually a good ratio, but you can cut it down to 2 if you want to. Just some good stuff, rank 4 things, and graveyard stuff is very strong at the moment. So yeah, there's that, but obviously replace this by good cards. We have Double Merrymaker, very, very important card. I'll talk about it in a second, because this card is special summoned from the extra deck. You can send one Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. I've already mentioned this multiple times, and there you have it. This is the other way of doing this. And during opponent's main or battle phase, you can banish this card until the end phase. So this is how your Exis monsters leave the field by card effect. This is how it does it. And then it gets back during the end phase. And if this card is banished with 2 or more Exis materials, you can also send one fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, the list Fawn of Albas. So also a way to send this card and summon stuff during the end phase. Very, very excuse me. Very, very nice. We also have Exosister Asophiel, very interesting card because it's a budget card and you need it as a rank 4 to deal with certain things. Draglubion, just for the rank 8 stuff. What you want to be playing is Hope Harbinger as well, and Numeron Dragon potentially, because this card can go into these 2, but you can switch them out with like these 2 and you'll still be fine if you have it. Explorer is removal. It's quite nice removal as well. You don't need the card, but sometimes you go into it, and sometimes it can be quite strong as well. So there's that. Can be as a quick effect. You can also banish this card and trigger the effect, but usually that's more of a merrymaker kind of thing. And we have Gigantic Champion Sargas. That sadly is not a Springans card, so you can't recycle it. So technically you want to be running 2 off of this card at least, because this card comes up a bit more often. But since this is a budget deck, trying to keep it as cheap as possible. With 1 it's still fine, it's okay, but you just don't have any way of really getting this card back. The effect is very strong because you can summon it on top of 1 Springans Exist monster, so that's nice. And while this card has material, you can add 1 Springans or Therion card from your deck to your hand. While this card has material is important because you can get rid of some materials of your own monsters, but you can't get more material on it because it's not a Springans card, so your monster effects that attach don't work with this one. But 1 Springans or Therion card from your deck to your hand every single turn does sound pretty crazy. And if material is detached from a monster on the field, you can target 1 card on the field, either destroy it or return it to the hand. So even if your opponent detaches something, you can activate this effect. And also with the effect of Captain Sargas, because this is a quick effect, you can detach 1 material from an Exist monster you control, then target 1 face-up card on the field to destroy it. You get a double pop with this one, very strong as well. So we have these cards now. We have Geonator Transverser, some budget link cards that you obviously want to be playing, like Nightmare Phoenix, Ugly Masquerena, Nightmare Unicorn, maybe some good link 4 as well, Access, Decode Talker, Appaloosa, all of these kind of cards you could be playing if you wanted to. Other than that, cards to, well, mention, you could be playing 1 Decisive Battle. It is okay, it does some stuff for the deck, but it's definitely not necessary, but it can be quite interesting from time to time. We have Evenly Matched, of course. Technically you could play Springans Calm. I tried it out at one point, like a testing with test hands, but every time I had it in hand, I didn't want it, so I didn't even craft it, didn't even bother. It does nothing really for the deck, but if you want to, you can try out one of them and see if it maybe works for you. Zeus comes into mind because you have lots of different ways of it. Making Exist monsters, attacking with Exist monsters, and you even have Heavy Armored Train Iron Wolf, because this card needs 2 level 4 machine monsters, and you can attack directly with this card then, so that's also a card to keep in mind. Let's move to the rating section. Alright, let's make this quick. We talk about the power level, the strength of this deck, this specific list, not Springans in general. So let's knock into this, and I would say it's a very solid 3 out of 5. It has very good plays, but it lacks a lot of this consistency with the field spell, because the field spell is somewhat important to the game plan and makes the deck a lot more, well, a lot stronger in theory. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but yeah, this deck is still very disruptible. So if you get a nice board off, it's a really nice board. But a lot of the time, well, not a lot of the time, but some of the time, you cannot get into anything good, and then your opponent just rolls over on you. So yeah, I would say like a very solid 3 out of 5, maybe a bit more on the higher side than the lower side, but it is very, well, dependent on certain playmakers, and if you don't get into them, or if that gets negated, then your turn looks a bit scary, but for yourself and not for your opponent. And that's when we get to the next point, which is consistency, and there I have to give it a, well, very low 3 out of 5. It is more consistent than you would think, because you added the new searcher and you have multiple different ways of searching multiple different things, but you will have hands where you don't have any access to the field spell, and then your plays look a lot worse than they have to, and that is a bit annoying, because then you need very specific cards in hands to actually do stuff, and that is a bit problematic. But some stuff like the Spright Smashers and whatnots have changed this a little bit, so it would be bad to give it a 2 out of 5, so I'm giving it a low 3 out of 5. And when it comes to budget value, I would say this deck is a very low 4 out of 5, because the budget, like, it's not super expensive. It is quite good for the fact of how it is. You can mix it with multiple different things. There's some branded variants that you can be playing. You can be playing some Albas shenanigans, because you obviously have that at your disposal. And also there's some other kind of things that you can play this deck in, some control decks, and I might come up with something along the line, so stay tuned for this. And also some of the cards are fairly generic, like the Therion cards you can use the branded engine and some other kind of stuff, so it's not super expensive, and also the cards are, well, fairly decent in other decks, so it's not terrible, and even the Springans cards don't even lock you into anything, so there is that. Let's move on to the replay. Alright, first replay, and this one is just here to showcase the combo of this deck, what you can do with this deck, because the opponent does nothing go first, they literally just go first and then pass turn. So yes, I could say it is a bit easy for me in this one, but this one is just to show off the combo and how you play on from that one, because during the next turn, for some reason, the opponent then finds all their power cards and does stuff. So let's see how that goes. We have the go for us, and I don't realize this. I think I was getting a drink at that time, and I didn't realize that they were doing anything, because I know I didn't have any disruptive card in hand that would do anything for me. So I thought, yes, let's just go grab a drink while they build their boards, and then I'm going to be back in time. I didn't really realize, and I thought, oh, I'm going first. Didn't realize I had an extra card, and didn't attack that turn, so don't hold that against me. But this one is just to showcase the combo. Afterwards, we'll see the deck in a bit more action than this one. We have the field spell, so we can do some crazy shenanigans. Now I use the card that I shouldn't have in hand, but we could also just have done the whole Springans Watch combo, because we do have the field spell up. So I could have added the card that searches it, Springans Kitt, to the hand, and then searched it and tucked one card back into the deck, and so on and so on and so on. We would have ended on like kind of the similar board in the end. It's not going to be as explosive, because obviously we have that extra card, but also we don't use one of the cards that we set. So if we just think, let's pretend we didn't have Forbidden Droplet, then the board would still be the exact same. Sent this card to the graveyard, and I decided to send Springans Rockey to the graveyard. Didn't really matter that much. Could have just kept Rockey, but now I can special summon this card, and with Springans Watch I can search another normal summon of a monster. So there is technically something that helps us here, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference using Springans Watch. And now we can send to the graveyard, guess what, Brothers. And with the Brothers we can special summon Rockey to our field, so that also makes kind of sense, and we still have the field spell, so that's good. I decided to search Branga into the hand, so we can discard that one. They do have whatsoever a disruption here. Not sure if this is where you should be using the disruption. There's plenty of times where you can really screw up Springans with well-timed Infinite Impermanence. Don't think this is the one where it matters. Adding another card back to hand is not our biggest concern here, but it is what it is. Kind of crazy that they didn't decide to set it and just kept it in hand. They could have potentially stopped me from using some of my spell cards, but it is what it is. You also obviously then are susceptible to spell trap removal, so yeah, don't know what the better decision is in that kind of regard. Usually you don't want to pass your turn without doing anything anyway. Then I decide to go for a Springans Merrymaker here, just all in defense position, because I thought it's my first turn, and the whole them using a hand trap on me that they hadn't set before manifested this thought in my mind that I can't attack this turn. Very strange. Why ever I had a main phase 2 then, who knows, but I didn't really pay much attention then, I guess. We sent another card to the graveyard just to have another name that we could potentially equip or banish with Branga to search some cards here. Then go into the whole Kitt play, because Kitt can be special summoned from the hand now. Then we can go into another Merrymaker, because Merrymaker is a very good card at a Springans name, so we can turn the other one into the great champion Sargas. Oh, gigantic, sorry Sargas, gigantic champion. This card looks super sick, and the animation is so nice. Sadly it's an ultra, but I do see the point why that is. Now we can use Sargas to add our Therion card to our hand, because we do have plenty of machine monsters in our graveyard, so we can use this. Technically you could have used this one, but you obviously want to keep that in the graveyard so the effect triggers, so we can special summon something back. I decided to go for Pedor because this card has the least amount of usages. Now I decided to go for Branga and can add Interluder to the hand. Obviously we could have added Tallyho here, but like I said, the problem with Tallyho is we don't have anything that really helps us with having more monsters on board. Like, yes, here would have helped to finish the game, don't worry, but I think we already had game on board here anyway with the stats. Also, our extra deck does not have any cards that we can summon that do stuff during the opponent's turn, and Xyz monsters, so it doesn't really matter all that much. So I decided to go more for the negate. That actually helps us here, and technically, since we have the Therion card in the rotation, can at later stages get us our Therion monster back from our graveyard as well. So there is always that one. You could have searched anything at this point, but this is the board that we end on. Let's just count through it. Let's say we didn't have those two, but we do have them. Then we would have one negation, two negations, we have one pop and a second pop. So this is already quite a crazy board, I would say, because all kind of negations, doesn't negate and destroy either of them, but spell trap and monster effects, so we've got that going for us. and we can stop certain opponents' cards from attacking by banishing this one. This has 2 materials as well, so technically we could banish this with 2 materials and then do all kinds of shenanigans, because then we can send another one of the fusion monsters, get doing the end phase another monster special summoned. Technically, if you ran the Albas cards, you could then fusion summon again with the monsters that your opponent just summoned that turn, and so on and so on and so on. But a lot of the time you don't have any cards in hand, so there's a bit of an issue with this specific one. Also, if we would have had more cards in the graveyard, we could have equipped more to this, and then we could have been able to use both effects. That if you if you banish this card with 2 materials on it, send the dragon, and use the effect of Sargas on this specific one. Technically, you can use Sargas on the champion as well, but then the champion has only like 0 materials left, and then you can't use the search effect during the next turn. So whatever your opponent is playing, you still have multiple different options with this, and we also drew into our, well, more generic helpful cards, so there is that too. Let's see what the opponent does. Now, they actually have Magnet combos. I don't know if they just now drew into Circular, and that opens up a whole line of plays. I mean, we all know what does. Circular is a crazy card, absolutely amazing. They can send Sigma to the graveyard, and I decided to, let's not let them get Circular on board, because Circular then searches other stuff when this card's on board, when you special summon things, and you have to negate way more. So let's keep this card in hand, or either make them waste their normal summon on it, so they can't really use the whole Diameter combo. Felt like that was the right play here, and then I decided to get rid of, sadly, of the Merrymaker. I could have just used the Therion effect as well if I wanted to. Doesn't really matter that much, but yeah, possibly could have been the wrong decision to send this card back, because now I have to get rid of the card that's on the Sargas, and since we only run 1 Sargas, that can be problematic in the long run. They now use some other combos, like the normal summon Diameter that they already have in hand. I was like, nah, let's not let them do that. Didn't really matter, because I could have just waited till they then went into the Exis monster, and then still negated the effects, even with Therion card, then popped the card, and then they would have still been out of resources, so it wouldn't have mattered that much. But I wanted to keep this body on board for as long as possible, so I used the Chalice here, but it wasn't necessary to use Chalice. If we had any other cards, then that would still have been a fine play. They go into Sigma. We decided to pop 2 cards here, because that's a perfect time to do it. Now Sigma also gets banished, and at that point they have to pass turn, because they didn't have any more combos, they didn't have any more normal summons, and even the trap card wouldn't have done anything for them, because we kept them off the monsters in the graveyard. So that worked very well for us as well, and at this point we can just completely go off, summon anything. I decided to go for another Merrymaker just to get Brothers to the graveyard to summon more, taking a link off. Then we can use this card to attach to it. We can add Kitt then back. We have already game on board anyway. I just wanted to show this off in case this becomes a replay, which it did. I wanted to showcase off that you can put, well, you can assemble game in so many different ways, because now we cleared that zone, and we can special summon Kitt with its effect, and you still have the extra monster zone as well, and so on and so on and so on. There's plenty of things that you can be doing, and at this point we just attack for game, and that is that. So let's move on to the replay that actually shows a bit of gameplay and how you have to deal with certain situations. Alright, let's see what we can do with this one. They are going first again, and I think they're playing Dino, so they have the whole Scrap Raptor combo. They decide to go into, well, something that's a little bit different here that I've not seen that many people do, but maybe their hand wasn't that good, maybe they couldn't get their combos off. They decide to go into Baguska. I'm not a dinosaur main, so I don't really know what makes sense, but the whole hand makes a little bit more sense later on if you see which cards they also still have in hand. So maybe that is a tiny bit better, because now you see Maxi. So not only would I have to be dealing with Baguska, which isn't too easy to do in a Springans deck, but also with Maxi. And maybe their thought was, oh, if they can't really get over Baguska without special summoning lots of stuff, then might as well Maxi it, hopefully draw into some like Go Secondary cards or whatever, and then win in the crackback. That could be could have been their thought process. I'm obviously not them, so I don't know. I activate Booty here because I feel like Booty's effect is less good on board than the Springans Watch. Getting this effect of searching some stuff, sending stuff to the graveyard, I felt like was a tiny bit better here. You can already see we have quite a lot of Springans monsters in our hand. That's usually not what you want, but that's the same with most decks. You always have this issue, oh, do I draw too many of my power spells and traps and hand traps, and none of the monsters, or do I draw too many monsters and nothing else that helps me? It is what it is. That is the luck of the draw. That is what card games are, most of them anyway. So we will add Springans Kitt here, and we send to the graveyard our Branga, because this card can search any kind of thing that we need, but I didn't want to overextend too much into Maxi here because I know they're probably playing something Dino related even, so I thought let's not do that. Let's set up one specific play that gives them one draw and gives us the opportunity to possibly live to see another day, and that is exactly what I'm doing. I sent to the graveyard Sargas because I don't really need it in hand, can always equip it to this, and decided to go for the one that has more defense points that I can possibly withstand some of their attacks. If they don't have much else, then they can't really use Baguska either. They get one card. And now what I can do with the stuff in the graveyard, I can search one of my negates and I go for Interluder again, because I really like this card. It also reduces attack points, so potentially even if they have like a 3500 attack point monster, I could still be safe with this card on board if I well, technically not, because obviously I've thought more of with the 2000 defense points, because I'm going to be setting this card, because this card goes back to the extra deck if I use the effect of Interluder, just to keep that one in mind. But at least 3000 attack points aren't going to screw us over. Sadly, it's dinosaurs. Can you think of any dinosaur that has 3500 attack points? Yes, of course you can. And you might be seeing this card soonish. They go for a Prankertops here for some reason. Don't really know if that makes much sense. Maybe they should have shifted this before so they could have attacked with this card. Would have been a tiny bit of a better play if they wanted to shift this anyway. But I guess they wanted to get my negate out or draw anyway with the Prankertops. So at this point, I decided to negate it. I also could have just used the effect of the Explorer. Then it wouldn't have mattered that much, but I wanted... well, technically you could have still gotten the attack reduction if I flipped this card before but didn't use the effect, and then used the effect of Explorer because they wanted to get rid of this one of my other cards. So this would have been banished and would have come back during my turn, would have been a lot more helpful here. So a bit of a misplay on my part, because I forgot that I also get the lose 1000 attack points if the card just gets banished by card effect. Doesn't necessarily have to be by this card effect that leaves the field, but works with any kind of card effect. So there is that. Probably should have just activated the effect of the Explorer to save itself. It is what it is. Sometimes you do make mistakes, and on this channel I make a lot, at least when it comes to playing, because I'm not that attentive from time to time, because it's kind of hard to build decks and then keep playing them for multiple games and games and games, and you lose focus from time to time, because playing against Telements is very exhausting. So we have the Conductor Tyrant on board, but if that is all they can do, and this is all they can do, then we're at least safe for the next turn. We don't have to be dealing with Baguska anymore, and hopefully not another Maxi. Plus our hand is, I don't want to say stacked, it doesn't do all that much. A well-timed Conductor Tyranno can throw us off here a little bit, but the thing is we can still negate the effect. If we go into the Great Sand Sea and just activate the effect, then we can do this, but I kind of wanted to bait it beforehand because I didn't want to lose my Xyz monster instantly. So I thought, oh, let's just go for anything else and hope they use their effect beforehand. And now I decided to not use the effect to search another Kitt, because I already used the special summon effect of Kitt here. So Rockey in hand was actually better. Just use the whole effect to send a dragon into the graveyard. So we have this. I think I normal summoned the card actually, so technically I could have gone into another Kitt, but at this point it didn't really matter because I still needed to discard one card to go to my extra deck monster, and that's what I'm doing. Then they use the effect of Called by the Grave on my fusion monster a bit prematurely. Maybe they should have just waited for whatever other combo I have, because there's lots of stuff you can get rid of in the graveyard when it comes to Springans, so might have been a bit prematurely. But it is what it is. Now I sent Brothers to the graveyard to summon Rockey back. Here they could have used Called by the Grave, would have been probably a lot better for them, because then they would have stopped me being able to deal with Conductor Tyranno, so that would have been a lot better for them. It is what it is, they didn't, so I have access to another rank 4, and here I decided to go for this one instead of the second Merrymaker that I have. Probably the second one would have been better, because then I could have gone into Sargas, and Sargas then would have been able to search the Therion cards, and then I would have had loads more plays. Like this, I just was kind of tunneling on getting rid of the Conductor Tyranno, and giving it back to the opponent's hand isn't even that good. So I probably should have just remembered that I have Interluder's effect to be able to reduce attack points, but I thought if my opponent doesn't use the effect of Conductor Tyranno and I have two Merrymakers, then I can't really get rid of it, because I don't really have a way of detaching one material to pop with Sargas, and I don't really have a way of attacking over it because it still has lots of attack points. So I thought Asophiel was the better play here. Not sure in the end how it is, but if they would have just kept it, I don't think with two Merrymakers or even with a Sargas and a Merrymaker I would have had a chance of getting rid of it. So technically, but if you bought with Sargas, I could have obviously searched a card that might have helped me. Talio comes to mind to go into another Asophiel here, so that would have still been possible at least. Now using, they did use the effect, and I do use Interluder here, so I get this card back to my extra deck, and now I can deal with both of them because I can easily attack over this because its attack points are reduced, and also I can now bounce this, which isn't the best thing, but we still have an Infinite Impermanence, and they should not win against us, but now our Interluder is sadly not in use because we have Asophiel here. Wouldn't have been in use if we went for Sargas as well, because Sargas isn't a Springans monster, and I'm pretty sure you have to give one Springans Exist monster back, so there is that. So this wouldn't have changed that much, but we would have had a few more plays, but now we have them on the next turn. They don't have the necessary cards in graveyard. They only have one dinosaur in the graveyard, so there's nothing they can do if they had. Isn't that great? Obviously they have Soul Eating Oviraptor, but I'm saying nay to this one, negated this, and yes, survived to see another turn. So we are still in the game. Another Rockey. Rockey does quite a lot here. We can do some things. We obviously have Brothers, and we still have the field spell up, so we can go into another Merrymaker, and now we can go through all of the combos. I can add Brothers back, have the resource loop going, we can go into Sargas, Sargas then can search stuff, we can have the Therion in our hand as well, we can go into Therion if they have any kind of hand traps, Nibiru or something, so we are safe from this one. We can now assemble game on board because we have Merrymaker. Now we can get this card back to the hand. Technically I could have chained Sargas, but I would have had to pop an own card here, and from this point onwards we have easy game. So you can see, even though you take a long time to get going, even though you're shut down at the start, it doesn't take many cards to get a whole good board going, especially if you run multiple Sargases in your extra deck, because this card is just crazy. The Surge and the Pop, and you don't even need to detach any materials from it, is an insane card. That is really good. So if you have to play two, but you saw one can still get you into lots of different plays. Hope you like the deck profile. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.